ang ekonomiya at infrastruktura sa bawat sulok ng bansa upang mapaunlad at mapabuti ang kalagayan ng mamamayang Pilipino. Sa gitna ng sangasangang krisis na idinulot ng pandemya ng COVID-19 sa bansa, kitang-kita natin na nakaagapay ang pamahalaan sa pangangailangan ng taong bayan sa usapin ng kalusugan, kabuhayan, edukasyon at kontra kahirapan. Kung kaya sa pangalawang bahagi ng Pre-SONA Forums, nariyan ang Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster upang pag-usapan ang pamanang malasakit. Susundan ito ng Participatory Governance Cluster para sa ikatlong bahagi ng Pre-SONA Forums upang ihatid ang kwento ng pamanang pagkakaisa na resulta ng pagpapayabong sa tiwala ng publiko sa gobyerno, kasabay ng higit pang pagpapahusay sa paghahatid ng serbisyo publiko. Saksi tayo sa matibay na paninindigang politikal ng Administrasyong Duterte. Dahilan ito sa pagkakatatag sa diwa ng kapayapaan, katarungan, at pagkakapantay-pantay sa buong bansa. Kung kaya, sa ikaapat na bahagi ng Pre-SONA Forums, nariyan ang Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster upang talakayin ang pamanang kaligtasan at kapayapaan. Sa panglima at huling bahagi ng Pre-SONA Forums, nariyan ang Climate Change, Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction Cluster, handog ang pamanang katatagan upang talakayin ang pagpapahusay sa kahandaan at katatagan ng mga komunidad laban sa mga kalamidad at sakuna at pagpapaigting sa pagpapatupad ng mga polisiyang poprotekta sa kalikasan. Matapos ang 5 taong pamumuno ni Pangulong Duterte, ang bunga ng tunay at makabuluhang pagbabago ang magsisilbing pamana ng kanyang administrasyon sa sambayanang Pilipino at sa mga susunod pang henerasyon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pamana ng Pagbabago, the 2021 Pre-SONA Forums. Moderating our program is Presidential Communications Operations Office Secretary Jose Ruperto Martin M. Andanar.
Good morning, Maayong buntag, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Before the State of the Nation address of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, we, in the Presidential Communications Operations Office, together with the Office of the Executive Secretary and the Office of the Cabinet Secretary, bring you Pamana ng Pagbabago, the 2021 Pre-SONA Forums. For the past years, we weaved and shared with you the story of progress through the cabinet clusters. And we have seen how the promises of change reached and affected the lives of every Filipino. The past 2 years have challenged us even more due to the threat of COVID-19. But we remain steadfast as we bring you this year's Pre-SONA series. We are a government that is strong and resilient, a government that continues to work for the people. Disasters and pandemic notwithstanding. From the series of Tatak ng Pagbabago, This year's Pre-SONA highlights the legacy that the Duterte administration will leave. This is Pamana ng Pagbabago, the 2021 Pre-SONA forums. In today's Pre-SONA, we will witness the report of the Security, Justice, and Peace clusters. Ang report na maghahayag ng pamanang kaligtasan at kapayapaan para sa bawat Pilipino. Now, to tell us more about the lasting legacy of the cabinet clusters, let us welcome on stage Cabinet Secretary of the Republic of the Philippines, Secretary Carlo Alexi Nograles.
Maraming salamat, PCO Secretary Martin Andanar, Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, National Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, mga kabalikat ko sa gabinete, Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr., Secretary Eduardo Anyo, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., Secretary Menardo Guevara, Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr., members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Security, Justice, and Peace Cabinet Cluster, partners in the private sector, civil society organizations, friends from the media, fellow public servants, esteemed guests, mga kababayan, maayong adlaw kaninyong tanan. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all to the Tatak ng Pagbabago 2021, Pamanang Kaligtasan at Kapayapaan Pre-SONA Forum of the Security, Justice, and Peace Cabinet Cluster, the fourth of our five-part Pre-SONA proper forums, leading to the sixth and final State of the Nation address of our beloved President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on July 26. The first leg of this series, Pamanang Kaunlaran, was conducted last April 26 by the Economic Development and Infrastructure Clusters, together with Sulong Pilipinas 2021, Partners for Progress. The second installment, the Pamanang Malasakit Pre-SONA Forum of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, was held exactly a week ago, on Wednesday, July 14. The third installment, the Pamanang Pagkakaisa Pre-SONA Forum of the Participatory Governance Cluster, was conducted in Cebu last Friday, July 16. This year, in preparation for the pre-SONA forums and the final SONA of the President, and considering the importance of reaching out to our countrymen in the provinces, we adopted several innovations that allowed us to conduct the Kasama sa Pamana regional pre-SONA series in the country's 12 regions. These forums allowed us to share what government has done and continues to do to address the broad range of issues that concern them with more Filipinos. Dahil tungkulin nating ipaalam sa ating mga kababayan na tuloy-tuloy ang pagsusukli ng gobyerno sa kanilang pagtitiwala sa pamamagitan ng mga proyekto at programa na tumutugon sa mga suliranin ng ating lipunan. As with pre-SONA forums in previous years, we aim to fulfill the following objectives in this year's pre-SONA activities. First, to provide the data, figures, and details that will contribute to a better understanding of the messages the President will deliver in his State of the Nation address. Second, to provide an extensive report on the administration's accomplishments over the past 5 years, consistent with our national development goals and the plans for the remainder of the President's term and the progress of our COVID-19 pandemic containment and mitigation initiatives. And third, to provide you, our people, our kababayans, with the opportunity to raise your concerns directly to the President through his representatives in the Cabinet. Atas ng ating saligang batas na taon-taon ang SONA, Ngunit batid din natin na hindi sapat ang oras ng SONA para ilatag ang mga programa, polisiya at gawain ng pamahalaan at ipaabot sa kabatiran ng ating mga kababayan. At this point, allow me to provide a brief recap of the major highlights of the first 3 Pre-SONA forums. In the first Pre-SONA forum, Pamanang Kaunlaran, EDC Chair and Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III reported that the country benefited from a period of growth from 2016 to 2019, where 6 million Filipinos were lifted out of poverty. And our poverty incidence rate dropped to 16.7% in 2018 from 23.5% in 2015. While the pandemic interrupted the momentum of our anti-poverty gains, Secretary Dominguez emphasized that the Duterte administration did what was necessary to protect Filipino lives and to strengthen our health system, investing a total of 2.76 trillion pesos in our pandemic response efforts. Malaki po ang pondo na inilaan para labanan ang COVID. Tumatayo po ito bilang patunay na malinaw po ang prioridad ng administrasyon, ang kalusugan at buhay ng ating mga kababayan higit sa lahat. As a consequence, steps needed to be taken to reallocate our resources. As reported by Infrastructure Cluster Chair and Public Works and Highway Secretary Mark Villar, the Build, Build, Build program of the administration had raised our country's infrastructure spending to 1.049 trillion pesos in 2019, coming from only 590.5 billion pesos in 2016. But last year, this was brought down to 824.9 billion pesos due to the pandemic. Our goal is to bring this back up to 1.169 trillion pesos or 5.9% of GDP this year. The infrastructure cluster also focused on building healthcare facilities to adequately respond to the pandemic. In the second Pre-SONA forum, Pamanang Malasakit, HD PRC Chair and Social Welfare and Secretary and Development Secretary Rolando Bautista presented in detail the milestones and accomplishments of the cluster in the delivery of basic services and capacity-building interventions for Filipinos and vulnerable sectors, as well as our efforts to combat the pandemic. Importante po ito dahil bukod sa katotohanan na ang mga mahihirap ang mas tinatamaan at umiinda sa pandemya, marami sa mga suliranin ng ating bansa ay nangangailangan pa rin ng pagtugon, may pandemya man o wala. Such programs include the strengthening of the foundation of education in the country, with the construction of around 150,000 classrooms and school facilities, the hiring and training of more than 200,000 teachers, improvements in the K-12 program, benefiting 3.2 million students, the financial assistance programs that help 2.2 million Filipino youth access basic and tertiary education, the alternative learning system for out-of-school youth and adults, as well as the 9.7 million technical and vocational education and training graduates. On improving health services, Secretary Bautista presented updates on the implementation of the Universal Healthcare Act that has now benefited 110 million Filipinos. Information education activities on adolescent reproductive health that benefited 5.4 million youth, and responsible parenthood and family planning that benefited 6.5 million individuals. The Tutok Kainan supplementation program for nutritionally at-risk pregnant women and children 6 months to 23 months old, and other feeding programs. Programs and projects under our interagency task force on zero hunger were also highlighted in his report, and this includes the enhanced partnership against hunger and poverty, along with many other programs intended to help our farmers and fisherfolk increase their agricultural income, productivity, and capacity to ultimately improve their quality of life. Updates were also provided on social protection programs such as the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program benefiting 4.3 million households since the enactment of the 4-Piece Act enacted into law in 2019, the Social Pension Program benefiting 3.6 million senior citizens, as well as livelihood projects and various assistance extended to individuals and families affected by typhoons, disasters, and other emergencies, which have so far benefited a total of 5.6 million Filipinos. And finally, Secretary Bautista also reported on our ongoing efforts to directly address the adverse effects of the pandemic. And these include the Social Amelioration Program, or SAP, which provided assistance to displaced OFWs, disadvantaged workers, health workers, and frontliners, and other affected sectors in our population, the status of the COVID-19 hospitals and health facilities, together with an update on the national vaccination program. The world may have been turned upside down by an unprecedented pandemic, but the government did not press the pause button on its various anti-poverty and anti-hunger programs. Instead, we adapted to the limitations and restrictions that we were compelled to implement due to COVID-19. Kasi ito po ang mahigpit na direktiba ni Pangulong Duterte. Pag kailangan ng taumbayan, hindi pwedeng magdahilan. Kailangan gumawa ng paraan. At ito po ang ating sinasakatuparan. In the third Pre-SONA Forum, Pamanang Pagkakaisa, PGC Chair and Interior and Local Government Secretary Eduardo Anyo, along with PGC Co-Chair and Budget and Management Secretary Wendell Abisado, both reported on programs that promote citizen participation in government processes and decision-making, as well as ensure effective implementation of national programs and projects at the local government and grassroots levels. Kasama po sa kanilang inilahad ang patuloy na pagtaguyod ng kapayapaan katuwang ang mga LGUs. Upang ito ay ating matamo, patuloy ang pagpapahusay ng kakayanan ng ating mga LGUs para maghatid ng kinakailangang serbisyo sa ating mga kababayan at para mapanindigan ang mabuting pangangasiwa para sa maayos na pagbibigay ng serbisyo publiko. They also elaborated on the policies and programs of government in view of the new governance landscape with a full devolution of government services by virtue of Executive Order Number 138 Series of 2021, which are aimed towards the well-being of every Filipino. The PGC shared that the budget allocated, obligated, and disbursed for COVID-19 response programs, projects, and activities of various departments and agencies are proactively disclosed and regularly updated on the Department of Budget and Management's website. As of June 25, 2021, DBM reports that a total of 665.72 billion pesos was released to various agencies and departments for their respective COVID-19 response programs. Of this amount, a total of 562.18 billion pesos or 84.5% has already been obligated, and about 497 billion pesos or 88.4% has already been disbursed by various agencies. Malinaw po na ginagawa ng gobyerno ang lahat upang magamit ang lahat ng nakalaang pondo para sa mga programa at sinisigurado po natin na hindi po natutulog ang pondo ng taumbayan. Kung ano ang pinaglaanan, yun ang isa sa katuparan. Specifically, government has almost fully obligated and disbursed 93.09% and 95% respectively, the 387.17 billion pesos fund authorized under Republic Act number 11494 or Bayanihan 1. Meanwhile, 205.12 billion pesos has been released under Republic Act 11469 or Bayanihan 2, of which obligations amounting to 187.84 billion pesos and disbursement at 141.45 billion pesos, that's 91.58% and 75.3% respectively, have been released. Updates on the actual targets and accomplishments of these response programs and strategies are regularly published and submitted by the executive branch to Congress and to the Commission on Audit for monitoring and evaluation. The national government also conducted the Dagyao 2020 Open Government Virtual Town Hall meetings, where about 10 national Dagyao sessions and 38 regional sessions on education, employment, and stimulus packages, among others, were held. And this allowed 212,226 participants to raise their questions and concerns on key national and local programs, issues, and plans amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The outputs from these dialogues are published online and were used as key reference in shaping and updating government policies to ensure better public sector performance and service delivery. With the PGC, we have gathered and heard the people's comments and suggestions to improve government services and create programs and projects that are responsive to the needs of every Filipino. Patuloy ang pagtaguyod natin sa prinsipyo na kaakibat na mabuting pangangasiwa ay ang mahusay na pakikilahok ng taong bayan. Mula sa pagbalangkas ng mga alituntunin at patakaran hanggang sa pagpapatupad ng mga proyekto at serbisyo, mula sa pambansang pangasiwaan hanggang sa lokal na pamahalaan. Now, in today's Pre-SONA Forum, Pamanang Kaligtasan at Kapayapaan, SJPC Chair and National Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, along with the principals of the SJPC member agencies, will make a detailed report on the cluster's continued efforts to attain its objectives of a peaceful and secure nation towards sustainable and inclusive development. We will hear from our SJPC principals the government's accomplishments in terms of the following cluster goals: protecting the national territory and boundaries, safeguarding territorial integrity, sovereignty and sovereign rights, ensuring the welfare of overseas Filipinos, strengthening the rule of law, institutionalizing efficient and impartial justice systems, and advancing and protecting human rights, attaining a just and lasting peace. And through these years, the SJP Cabinet Cluster has continued to undertake activities towards reaching these goals and to institutionalize policies that will contribute to sustaining security, justice, and peace in the country. At this point, kindly allow me to mention that even before the COVID-19 pandemic, a big problem that we have been facing is hunger and malnutrition, which was compounded by the effects of COVID-19. Because of these necessary measures, we have seen the fragility and inequalities in our food systems. The gains realized in prior years have been reversed, thus the need for us to work together double time to recover lost ground faster. We have seen the results of collaborative efforts among different stakeholders. We will be able to achieve results faster and more efficiently if we are guided by the whole of nation approach. Apart from the regular projects, activities, and programs enrolled in our SJPC roadmap, our cluster principals will also present today the cluster's efforts and interventions to address the impacts of the ongoing pandemic. After the reports and presentations, an open forum will take place to give our kababayans the chance to direct their questions to the secretaries and heads of concerned agencies and departments. Just a reminder, the last leg of our Pamana ng Pagbabago 2021 Pre-SONA Forum is the Pamanang Katatagan of the Climate Change Adaptation Mitigation and Disaster Risk Reduction Cluster tomorrow at the PICC. Before I wrap up, let me extend my sincerest gratitude and congratulations to our partners who made today's Pre-SONA Forum possible: the Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster Chair, Secretariat, and members, and of course, the Presidential Communications Operations Office, the Office of the Executive Secretary, and my fellow workers in the Office of the President. Marami nang nagawa at patuloy ang pagpapaigting sa ating mga ginagawa upang may paabot ang tunay na malasakit at pamana ng pagbabago sa lahat, may pandemya man o wala. Asahan ninyo na mula ngayon hanggang sa dulo ng panunungkulan ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Duterte, bibigyan ng lubos na atensyon, pondo at panahon ang mga programang kakalinga at magmamalasakit sa napag-iwanan nating mga kababayan at pagtataguyod sa pagkakaisa ng bawat Pilipino. Sa pamamagitan ng katangiang ito, inaasahan natin na umusbong ang bagong yugto sa kasaysayan kung saan ang lahat ay katuwang at may ambag sa pangangasiwa. Sama-sama nating iwagayway ang bandila ng isang lahing batid ang halaga ng pagkakaisa, kapayapaan at tunay na pagmamalasakit para sa kapwa. Mga kababayan, kapag sama-sama kaya nating umahon, sa tulong ng Diyos at sa magkaisang aksyon, tayo ay babangan. Ngunit sa lahat ng pagkakataon, kailangan natin magtulungan. Padayon ta sa atong Pre-SONA Forum karong adlaw. Daghang salamat ug maayong buntag pag-usab.
Maraming salamat, Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles. And now we proceed to the report prepared by the SJPC for the Filipino people. Although all of us are truly being tested by the pandemic, this cluster remains steadfast in ensuring that the needs of every Filipino anywhere in the country is being addressed. To begin the cluster reports, we would like to call on stage the Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster Chairperson, Secretary Delphine N. Lorenzana of the Department of National Defense.
Isang pinagpalang araw sa ating lahat. Bilang chairperson ng Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster, maraming salamat sa inyong patuloy na pagsubaybay sa aming Ulat Bayan taon-taon. Our cluster, consisting of the Department of National Defense, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of the Interior and Local Government, Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, Department of Justice, the National Security Advisor, the Office of the Executive Secretary, and the Office of the Cabinet Secretary are very excited to present our accomplishments in this last Pre-SONA forum. Continuing with our nation's fight against COVID-19, your Defense Department remains at the forefront of our containment and recovery efforts. The Office of the Civil Defense and the Armed Forces of the Philippines lead in the management and distribution of medical supplies, assisting in the biggest vaccination program in our nation's history. Ayon sa direktiba ng Pangulo, layunin nating mabigyan ng ligtas, epektibo at libreng bakuna ang lahat ng Pilipino. Combining the whole of nation, whole of society, and whole of government approaches, we ensure the importation of anti-COVID-19 vaccines, deploy them to implementing units nationwide, and facilitate the inoculation of our citizens. Katuwang natin dito ang mga lokal na pamahalaan, pribadong sektor, at civil society organizations. Our inclusive and holistic strategy is best reflected in the structures of the Interagency Task Force, National Task Force, and the NTF COVID-19 clusters. SJPC member agencies lead in accelerating the implementation of our vaccination program. As of July 19, our country has received close to 28 million anti-COVID vaccine doses, over 15.1 million of which have been administered nationwide. 10.4 million Filipinos have received their first doses, while 4.7 million are now fully vaccinated. Having ordered 164 million doses more through the COVAX facility and regular procurement, we are now awaiting the delivery of 136.1 million additional doses. On track in our vaccination program implementation, we are looking forward to having a better Christmas this year. Kahit abala sa pandemya, nagampanan ng ating kagawaran, ang pangunahin nitong tungkulin na tiyakin ang seguridad ng bansa mula sa anumang banta sa labas o loob man nito. Ang diskarte ng ating pamahalaan na labanan ang insurhensya at lokal na terorismo nang hindi gumagamit ng bala o solusyong militar ay naging matagumpay. By offering social assistance to rebels who return to the fold of the law, we have greatly reduced threats from armed groups which have been hampering inclusive economic development or growth for more than 50 years now. At dahil sa tagumpay ng Enhanced Comprehensive Local Integration Program or ECLIP ng Task Force Balikloob, inilunsad rin ang tugon o tulong mula sa gobyernong nagmamalasakit para makapagbagong buhay ang mga dating rebelde sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Lahat ng rehiyon ay mabibigyan ng pagkakataong umunlad, walang iwanan. Great milestones were reached by the Armed Forces of the Philippines in enhancing its capacity and capability. It has upgraded its systems, updated its doctrines, and acquired capital assets and vital equipment. Ilan lamang sa mga bago nating kagamitan ang 2 missile-capable frigates o barkong pandigma, eroplano, helikopter at iba pa. Ginagamit na natin ang mga ito sa territorial defense, counterinsurgency peacekeeping, at humanitarian assistance and disaster response operations. Although we still have a long way to go to achieve our desired level of defense posture, we can now proudly say that the AFP is definitely stronger than it was before. Emboldened by President Duterte's orders to defend what is rightfully ours without going to war and maintain the peace and the seas, we have consistently asserted our sovereignty and sovereign rights. Patuloy ang pagpapaunlad ng infrastruktura sa Kalayaan at Mavolis Islands. Pinaigting natin ang pagpapatrolya at pagbabantay sa ating himpapawid at karagatan. We also intensified our deterrence activities and deployed more personnel in our borders, especially in the West Philippine Sea and the Sulu-Celebes Seas. We now have more littoral monitoring stations and detachments in the strategic locations to monitor vessels transiting within Philippine waters and key sea lanes of communications. Naging mabunga rin ang ugnayan at pakikipagtulungan natin sa iba't ibang bansa sa loob at labas ng rehiyon. Dahil sa trilateral cooperative arrangement natin sa Indonesia at Malaysia, mabilis nating napababa ang mga insidente ng kidnap for ransom at iba pang krimen sa karagatan ng Sulu. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, also invested on climate and disaster resilience. More importantly, member states have committed to assert the ASEAN centrality in dealing with other countries in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, especially towards the peaceful and amicable resolution of territorial disputes in accordance with international laws. Bagamat nakakalungkot ang pagkasawi ng ating mga sundalo sa magkakasunod na insidente sa Air Force kamakailan lang, hindi matitinag ang ating defense team para patuloy na paglingkuran ang bayan at ang sambayanan. Ito rin ang dahilan ng pagsisikap ng Department of Foreign Affairs sa pagtitiyak ng kapakanan at kagalingan ng mga overseas Filipino workers na kinikilala nating bilang mga bagong bayani. At ngayon, Pakinggan natin si Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. na mag-uulat ng mga nagawa ng Department of Foreign Affairs. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Secretary Lorenzana. DFA is spread out in 94 foreign service posts around the world across all time zones. DFA works round the clock to advance Philippine moral leadership. First on the front lines worldwide, most are still unvaccinated. One ambassador died, another almost. 2 consular officers, scores in mortal danger. You don't hear them crying, brave and true like Filipino nurses. Then in human rights, peace and security, protection of migrants, asserting our sovereignty, broadening cooperation and alliances, which paid off, why we are in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, so we are not ex-parted. With the now finalized UN joint program, we strengthen national institutions to promote and protect human rights by technical assistance and capacity building, even as we battle the worst of human rights abuses, drug trafficking, and drug addiction. The program is rooted in Duterte's directive for constructive and open engagement with the UN in a non-politicized manner. The joint Philippines-Iceland resolution is a major victory for our independent foreign policy. Nobody dictates to us how to protect our own people, but where we need it, we welcome help. Thank you, Justice Secretary Guevara and UN Resident Coordinator Gustavo Gonzalez. We're making real progress in human rights while protecting our society from the worst of scourges, drug trafficking that takes over states as in Central America, and drug addiction that destroys its willing victims. We led in the formulation and adoption of the Treaty to Ban Nuclear Weapons, the first legally binding international agreement. It makes nuclear weapons illegal in 122 countries and increasing. The world has less to guess where a nuclear attack came from and who to blame. We waded into the fight for women's rights, not the abstract kind, but the right to plain life and basic safety from widespread sexual abuses in the home, among trafficked women and children in brothels and alleyways, and to the military use of rape as the coward's weapon of degradation. We were at the forefront in the fight for migrants' rights to decency, dignity, and protection from de facto slavery. Our president did the unthinkable in formal diplomacy. He denounced the customary kafala system on the way to its promised reform. He set kafala firmly on the path to extinction. The Arab states praise him. We laid down the terms of the migrant rights debate and shaped the global compact for migration. Not pie in the sky, but the achievable, because we had already negotiated those protections from Germany. Thank you, Germany. We deepened our engagement with the global coalition to defeat ISIS, and we went to Rome, not as victims, but proudly as victors, having vanquished ISIS in Mindanao by retaking Marawi with a bracing battle ratio of over 1,000 local and foreign jihadi dead to 165 AFP soldiers, to our grief and the Republic's glory. We denied terrorism the lying excuse that it is the response of the poor to injustice. The poor are never terrorists. Terrorists are a privileged breed. Terrorism is a full-time job. There is no solution for it but to stamp it out, as I told the global coalition. In the West Philippine Sea, we stopped the whining and the crying over milk spilled by the previous regime. We have not surrendered a single inch of territory. Not by word or deed have we weakened our right to everything in the West Philippine Sea. Without inviting pity by asking, we achieved an international consensus that the right is with us and might cannot ever take it away. DFA is proud to say, just because we have differences does not mean we have to fight over everything, but fight we will when we must. Most of all, we did what foreign policy must do or spare the expense of this department. Protect our citizens abroad and foreign nationals in our country. It isn't usually done by foreign states, but we helped foreign nationals caught flat-footed here by the pandemic on a scale unknown in the past, with the best foreign ambassadors ever, and the energy and initiative of Berna Puyat, thousands of foreign nationals were rounded up and sent home. The world watched with wonder. Then we took out of harm's way well over 400,000 overseas Filipinos and brought them safely home. We returned foreign garbage back to sender. The senders were Filipinos, of course. Canada Ambassador John Holmes helped make it happen, his farewell gift to our country. Ricky Rason waived ₱1 billion in port charges. Canada Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland pitched in. We had a mutual friend in Harvard, very Filipino of her. The face of the DFA is passport services. Making them available and accessible is numero uno. We opened new consular offices. We are cracking the whip on all of them and on ourselves to keep us on our toes. We opened temporary off-site services in rental-free spaces. Thank you, SM and Robinsons. I've heard complaints. Is this diplomacy? Yeah, diplomacy is first for the Filipino. DFA is adapting to the enduring abnormal of a pandemic that loosens and tightens its grip like it is playing with us. The online visa appointment and online passport application systems cut time and face-to-face contact. Now, I am honored to introduce DILG Secretary Eduardo Año for his report. Thrice wounded by the pandemic enemy, he is still fighting and winning battles. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Locsin Jr. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. The past 6 years was quick but monumental for the Department of the Interior and local government, especially in its pursuit towards a safer, more peaceful, and more progressive Philippines. Amid the almost unsurmountable challenges, the DILG prevailed sa pamumuno ni Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte at sa tulong ng matitino, mahuhusay at maasahang mga opisyal at kawani ng kagawaran at ng aming attached agencies, unti-unti nang nakakamit ang tunay at malawakang kapanatagan at pagsulong sa ating bansa. With the incessant toil and groundwork of the Philippine National Police and the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, 52% or 21,891 barangays nationwide are now declared drug-free. Libong-libong kilo rin ng iligal na drogang katumbas ng 59.14 billion ang nakumpiska mula sa mga drug syndicate na kung hindi napigilan ay maaaring maapinsala pa sa mas maraming buhay. Mayroong 289,622 katao na rin ang nasa kote at ngayon ay naghihimas na ng rehas. Kabilang na dito ang 12,069 na itinuturing na high-value targets. May 784 drug dens at clandestine drug laboratories naman ang sinalakay at natimbog ng mga otoridad. The last 6 years also saw the biggest voluntary surrender of 1,222,363 drug users and personalities, a feat that has never been seen in the country's history. These drug surrenderers have undergone the PNP's Recovery Wellness Program, where 48% are now living a normal life, far from the perils brought by illegal drugs. Namayagpag din tayo sa pagsukpo sa kriminalidad. Sa katunayan, patuloy ang pagtaas ng bilang ng mga nare-resolbang kaso sa bansa. We have also seen a consistent downtrend in the number of index crimes such as murder, homicide, rape, and robbery, among others, with theft registering almost 50% decrease in 2020. The continuous augmentation of police forces in communities and procurement of equipment likewise contributed in the dwindling crime rate and in realizing the ideal ratio of 1 police officer per 500 citizens. Hindi rin natin pinalampas ang katiwalian, iligal na gawain at pagpapabaya sa hanay ng pulisya on the orders of the President to weed out corrupt police officers. 17,142 cops were subjected to disciplinary actions and sanctions over the course of 4 years since 2017. Abang 906 naman ang natanggal sa serbisyo sa ilalim ng National Police Commission mula Hulyo 2016 hanggang Mayo ng kasalukuyang taon. Lahat ng mga mahalagang tagumpay na ito ay naisakatuparan dahil sa hindi matutumbansang pagsisikap at sakripisyo ng ating mga gobernador, ating mga mayors, barangay captains, at iba pang opisyal na nanguna at nakibahagi sa mga institusyong pinalakas natin tulad ng Anti-Drug Abuse Councils at Peace and Order Councils na kasangga ng pambansang pamahalaan upang lalong matutukan at mapalakas ang ating mga hakbang. Ngayon, tinatamasa na ng mga Pilipino ang bunga nito. Mas naging kumpiyansa sila sa pulisya at mas naging panatag sa kanilang araw-araw na pamumuhay. Sa katunayan, sa pinakahuling Gallup 2020 Global Law and Order Report, 8 sa 10 Pilipino ang naniniwala na sila ay ligtas at may seguridad sa bansa dahil na rin sa patuloy na pagbaba ng crime volume. Naitala noong 2020 ang 383,189 na kaso kumpara sa higit 500,000 noong 2017. Kabilang na rin ang Pilipinas sa top 50 ng mga bansa na may maayos na kampanya para sa kapayapaan at kaligtasan. Kapantay ang Australia, New Zealand, Poland at Serbia sa ating nakamit na Index 84 score. At dahil kinikilala natin ang mahalagang kooperasyon ng mga mamamayan at ibang-ibang sektor sa laban kontra droga, kriminalidad at korupsyon, binigyan natin sila ng boses na magsumbong at magsuplong ng mga tiwaling opisyal at iligal na gawain sa tulong ng 8888, PNP e-sumbong hotline at DILG Public Assistance Center. Sa kanilang mas aktibong pakikibahagi, 77 punong barangay ang sinampahan ng kaso sa Office of the Ombudsman at 89 sa kanila ang pinatawan ng preventive suspension dahil sa mga anomalya sa pamamahagi ng Social Amelioration Program. Sa paglaganap naman ng COVID-19, pinangunahan ng DILG ang paggabay sa ating mga LGUs upang tiyakin na napaiiral ang mga polisiya at direktiba ng IATF-EID sa pag-ampat ng virus. Bumuo ng mga barangay health emergency response teams na naging katuwang ng local COVID-19 task force sa pagtugon sa pandemya. To assist in intensifying contact tracing in the country, 50,880 contact tracers were hired by the department, leading to 1,996,335 close contacts successfully traced and assessed. Hindi rin nakalusot ang mga paglabag sa quarantine classifications at katiwalian sa SAP. Sa 480 na kaso na hinawakan ng DILG, may mga napadala ng show cause orders na i-refer sa Office of the Ombudsman at Philippine National Police at mahigit sa 200 ang kasalukuyang iniimbestigahan ng DILG sa mga regional offices. Ilan lamang ito sa mga maraming tagumpay sa nakaraang 6 na taon. Lahat nakatuon sa nag-iisang hangarin na mapag-ibayo ang aming paglilingkod. Truly, the past 6 years of DILG has been challenging. But in the name of excellent public service, it was a journey worth all the hardships and sacrifices. Isa pong karangalan sa bawat kawani ng DILG ang maging bahagi ng tunay na pagbabago at makapaglingkod ng may tapang at malasakit. Hangat po namin lahat na maipagpatuloy at mapaigting pa ang magandang sinimulan ng Administrasyong Duterte at ng DILG upang tuloy-tuloy ang pag-usad ng buong bansa tungo sa pinakaasam-asam na kapayapaan, kaayusan at kaunlaran na ating ipagmamalaki at ipamamana sa susunod pang mga salinlahi. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Mabuhay ang sambayan ng Pilipino. At bilang pagpapatuloy ng SJPC Pre-SONA's Forum, narito po si Presidential Advisor for Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity, ang ating pong Vaccine Cesar, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr.
Thank you, Secretary Anyo, my Chief of Staff, for sharing with us the anti-COVID-19 measures your agency is carrying out in partnership with the national government and local government agencies. During the inaugural address of the President Rodrigo Roa Duterte in 2016, he said, and I quote, "On the domestic front, my administration is committed to implement all signed peace agreements in step with the constitutional and legal reforms." Ibinabalita ko po sa inyo ngayon ang ating mga nakamit sa usaping kapangkapayapaan sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Duterte. Sa gitna po ng maraming hamon na dulot ng pandemya, ay tuloy-tuloy ang ating pagsulong sa komprehensibong prosesong pangkapayapaan sa bansa sa pamamagitan ng 6-point Peace and Development Agenda as shown. Being the first Mindanaoan president, he had a very deep understanding of the Bangsamoro peace process and knew what he had to be done to sustain the gains of peace. The implementation of the political and normalization tracks of the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro took a major leap forward during his administration. President Duterte successfully shepherded the passage of the Republic Act 11054, or the Bangsamoro Organic Law, giving birth to a new autonomous region in Mindanao that embodies the dreams and aspiration not only of the Moro people but the entire Filipino nation. Under the normalization track, 12,145 former MILF combatants have undergone the process of decommissioning and are now living as a peaceful and productive civilians as their camps are being transformed into a progressive and resilient communities. Tinalikuran na po ng ating mga mandirigma ang buhay ng karahasan at ngayon ay tumutulong sa pamahalaan upang isulong ang kapayapaan at kaunlaran sa kanilang mga lugar. The Inter-Cabinet Cluster Mechanism with our CABSEC on normalization was also created to harmonize the initiatives of national allied agencies in the implementation of the program under the normalization track. We also demonstrated our sincerity to fulfill all commitments made with the Moro National Liberation Front under the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. The government established the two peace coordinating committees to engage Professor Nur Miswari and Muslim Ensema to further strengthen the GPH-MNLF peace process. The MNLF has also become an integral part of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, wherein 10 out of 80 BTA members represent the MNLF. Currently, a transformation program is being crafted to address the concerns of the MNLF combatants and their families. It is expected that the program will commence in Sulu this year. As part of the continuing efforts to end local communist armed conflict, the EO-70 provided a safe space for constructive engagement with our communities. Sa pamamagitan ng mga local peace engagement na ito, nagawa nating makipag-usap ng masinsinan sa mga miyembro ng rebeldeng grupo at kumbinsihin silang ibaba ang kanilang mga armas at tuluyang talikuran ang armadong karahasan. As Cabinet Officer for Regional Development and Security for Central Luzon, we led members of the local regional task force for ending local communist armed conflict in signing a pledge of commitment against the communist terrorist group. Ang lahat ng ito ay magpapakita na pagnanais ng Administrasyon Duterte na wakasan ang paghahasik ng takot at kaguluhan ng communist terrorist group sa mga komunidad at tuluyang ang mga residente ay iangat ang antas ng kanilang kabuhayan. Isa sa mga halimbawa po dito ay ang pagkalansag ng kilusang guerrilla Sierra Madre at ang pakipag-ugnayan natin sa samahan ng mga magsasaka sa Central Luzon na kung saan ay tinalakay natin ang paano magkaroon ng development ng irigasyon sa kanilang mga probinsya. The historic signing of the Declaratory Implementing Document with the Revolusionaryong Partidong Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionario Proletarian Army, Alex Bungkayo Brigade, Tabara, Paduano Group, or Kapatiran in short, on July 19, 2019, helped fast-track the transformation process of the group member. On September 19, 2019, President Duterte witnessed the decommissioning of the 727 Kapatiran members. At least 266 of them underwent training as peacekeepers in their communities. Meanwhile, 724 of the members received their livelihood settlement grant amounting to 50,000 each. The peace process with the Cordillera Bodong administration, Cordillera People's Liberation Army, continues to move forward. 353 firearms owned by the CPLA members were turned over to the Police Regional Office Cordillera and destroyed at Camp Badodangwa on October 23, 2020. We also have 508 former rebels of the CPLA, CBA, and their next of kin employed as forest guard in the Cordillera. Ang tuloy-tuloy na pakipag-ugnayan sa pamahalaan sa CBA, CPLA at ang kapatiran ay nagpapakita ng ating pagnanais na tulungan ang mga miyembro ng landas ng katahimikan at kapayapaan at iangat ang kanilang kabuhayan. Aside from implementing the peace agreements, we created a social healing and peace building or SHAPE program to promote social cohesion, mutual understanding and reconciliation across the country, and to provide viable platforms for the meaningful participation and involvement of the women, youth, and other vulnerable sectors. Currently, this is being utilized in the ongoing Marawi rehabilitation, in strengthening the role of women and youth in the peace process, conflict transformation, and the protection of human rights and international humanitarian law are also being mainstreamed as part of the National Action Plan for Women and Youth. This administration has continued the implementation of the Payapa at Masaganang Pamana or Pamana program with aims to carry out socio-economic intervention in conflict-affected communities throughout the country. To date, the national government has implemented more than 18 billion and 44,000 Pamana projects from 2017 to 2021 across the country. This is in support of its vision of building peaceful, progressive, and conflict-resilient communities. Mga kababayan, lahat ng programang aking nabanggit ay resulta ng sinseridad at determinasyon ng Administrasyong Duterte na isulong ang komprehensibong proseso ng kapayapaan sa bansa. This is a result of our collective efforts and continuing commitment to work together in pursuing a just and lasting peace and sustainable development. At this juncture, I would like to call on Justice Secretary Attorney Minardo I. Guevara, who will report to us the major accomplishment of his agency. Maraming salamat po.
Support given by the Filipino people to the President in 2016 proves how strongly we collectively value justice. A longtime prosecutor, the President ran on a platform to fight illegal drugs and the criminality and other social ills associated with it. His electoral victory then and the continuing strong support for his government to this day manifest two things. First, it confirms how pervasive the drug problem is. And second, it shows our people's ardent desire to live in a society characterized by peace and order, free from the menace of drugs. The Department of Justice plays a central role in the fight against drugs
and the establishment of a society built on peace and order. As the government's prosecution arm, it is the DOJ, through the National Prosecution Service, which ensures that offenders who violate our laws are tried in court to be meted out the punishment commensurate to their crimes. The department likewise manages penal farms and colonies through the Bureau of Corrections. In these farms and colonies, convicted criminals serve their court-mandated sentence while they undergo rehabilitation as they prepare for their possible reintegration into society. The department also guards our borders through the Bureau of Immigration. Our work prevents the entry of undesirable aliens, expels foreigners who disturb our peace, and prevents the trafficking and exploitation of our countrymen whose only fault lies in seeking greener pastures overseas for the betterment of their families. I am proud to announce that in the past 5 years, under the President's leadership, the Department of Justice has achieved significant improvements across our performance indices. In 2020, the rate of disposition of cases by the National Prosecution Service stood at an all-time high of 91.19%, up from 87.23% in 2016. The backlog rate of the NPS has also considerably decreased from 49.80% in 2016 to just 29.5% in 2020. More importantly, our conviction rate in trial courts has more than doubled. In 2016, that rate stood at a measly 20.4%. At the end of 2018, the year of my appointment as Secretary of Justice, our prosecutors had increased their conviction rate to 41.74%. In 2020, the DOJ's conviction rate registered its highest at 49.46%. These were made possible by the hard work and unwavering dedication of our prosecutors in the discharge of their duty and by a host of programs and interventions designed and implemented by the DOJ leadership to assist our prosecutors in their task. In 2020, the department launched various training programs to upskill our prosecutors in their handling of difficult and complex cases involving offenses ranging from cybercrime, competition and commercial crimes, human trafficking, and online sexual exploitation of children to those involving violations of human rights. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Immigration has imposed stricter border controls to prevent further COVID-19 infections as the nation fights the spread of the pandemic. While our communities were locked down, guarding our national borders remained crucial in light of the emergence of new variants which have been deemed more infectious by health experts. Since our immigration officers ultimately stand as our national frontliners, the department marshaled support for the procurement of critical PPEs for their health and safety, and the recruitment of additional employees in anticipation of the gradual opening of our borders. With the help of the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, hundreds of suspected victims of international and domestic trafficking in persons have also been intercepted and cared for. This, among many other initiatives, exhibit this government's resolute will in professionalizing and setting the bar of integrity higher at our Bureau of Immigration so that it may guard more efficiently our borders and keep our people safe and sound wherever they may be found. Finally, notwithstanding the severe overcrowding in our penal farms and colonies, our prison population has been spared from the worst effects of the pandemic. This achievement has been made possible by the prompt and coordinated action between and among the Bureau of Corrections, the Board of Pardons and Parole, and the department's leadership. The pandemic has underscored the urgent task of decongesting our prisons. Prison overcrowding makes social distancing impossible. This exacerbates the threat of transmission among persons deprived of liberty. In response to this threat, the Board of Pardons and Parole immediately worked on appropriate measures to facilitate the grant of pardon and parole to the PDL population most vulnerable to COVID-19 infection. This resulted in our promulgation of interim rules that have since expedited the process for the grant of pardon and parole. Over 300 prisoners have been released partly because of these interim rules. Quarantine and isolation facilities were likewise established in the most populated prison facilities. Under the leadership of the Bureau of Corrections, thorough, stringent, and more frequent inspections of prison facilities were also made to safeguard the peace, order, and health of everyone within the penal farms and colonies under our care. The impressive performance of our people across the department and its agencies, including the investigations on corruption conducted by the department together with other agencies of the government, the many successful operations of the National Bureau of Investigation, the thousands of clients served and families benefited by the work of our public attorneys and the Department of Justice Action Center, to name a few, forms part of this administration's legacy of industry, dedication, and fealty to the rule of law. This legacy is built upon a promise to protect the right of the Filipino people to life, liberty, and property, a promise that every day comes closer to fulfillment. Thank you. And now to our next and last speaker, National Security Advisor and Director General of the National Security Council, General Hermogenes Esperon Jr. Take it away, Sec. Jun.
Maraming salamat, Secretary Guevara. Tiyak na ang pagpapalakas ng ating sistemang panghustisya ay prioridad ng gobyerno. Magandang umaga sa lahat. In my capacity as the National Security Advisor, I have the privilege of presenting the initiatives we have taken to advance our priorities in national security. On anti-terrorism, we have learned from the lessons of the Marawi Shields. We now continue to come out victorious in the battlefields against the local terrorist groups and foreign terrorist fighters. Amidst the pandemic, we have strengthened the legal framework for prosecuting acts of terrorism. The Anti-Terrorism Act was signed into law last July 3. Through this, the security sector, the Anti-Terrorism Council, and law enforcement agencies now possess the necessary tools for combating terrorism more effectively. Groups and individuals have now been legally designated as terrorists. These include the CPP, NPA, NDF, fundamentalist and extremist groups, and other identified terrorist personalities. Through the ATA, we now align ourselves with the strong democracies in the global fight against terrorism. The ATA mandates the adoption of the National Action Plan for Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism. Hence, its adoption by the Anti-Terrorism Council through Resolution Number 38. The NAP-PCBE is a framework at the national level implemented locally and led by the DILG. It synchronizes the government's programs and activities which address the factors that entice vulnerable groups towards violent extremism. We have conducted dialogues to facilitate the implementation of the NAP-PCBE. These include consultations with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism and the UN Counterterrorism Executive Directorate to identify areas of potential cooperation for better understanding of our priorities and counter-terrorism-related assistance. Ang pinagsabay na pagpapatupad ng Anti-Terrorism Act at NAP-PCBE ay kinilala bilang mahalagang tulong at pakikiisa sa pandaigdigang laban kontra terorismo. Itong mga programa ay pinuri sa United Nations Virtual Counter-Terrorism Week noong 2020. Sa usaping local communist armed conflict, ganap nang naipatupad ang mga proyekto ng National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict. Mula nang ito ay itinatag ni Pangulong Duterte noong December 2018. Our 12 clusters or lines of efforts and 17 joint regional task forces have created partnerships with our stakeholders. We continue to conduct engagements with community leaders in pursuit of the whole-of-nation approach. Correspondingly, these communities manifested their commitment to achieve lasting peace, inclusive development, and social reform. Our engagements at the local level have resulted in the LGU's declaration of the communist terrorist groups as persona non grata nationwide. Our ongoing security operations have produced dramatic successes against the CTG. 2,965 CTG members were neutralized during encounters and law enforcement operations. 80 of these are key national and territorial leaders. These include key members of the Central Committee of the CPP-NPA-NDF, such as CPP Chairman Julius Hiron, the National United Front Commission Head Vicente Ladlad, and several other high-ranking leaders. The CTG manpower was at its peak in 1987 at 25,200. Presently, the number stands at 3,706. And from a peak of 15,500 firearms in 1987, this has declined to 3,433. There is a substantial decline in the number of barangays under their threat and influence from 8,496 in 1986 to only 678 now. This clearing of barangays translates to the dismantling of guerrilla fronts, which allows us to develop peaceful and productive communities. 24 guerrilla fronts and 7 regional guerrilla units have been successfully dismantled. Other guerrilla fronts have been weakened due to our intensive security operations. Under the retooled Community Support Program, regional task forces have brought much-awaited programs and services for conflict-affected barangays. with innovations under the RCSP that led to Servicio Caravans, which cover the basic immediate needs of vulnerable communities. There has also been a surge of surrenderies. From 2016 to 2021, 18,433 surrenderies have chosen to leave the CTG and return to the folds of the law. As part of our reintegration program, former rebels are given a comprehensive package of benefits and assistance. Let me now go to our flagship project. The Barangay Development Program was approved by the President during a cabinet meeting on January 6 last year. This program consists of projects and activities that address the root causes exploited by the communist terrorists in conflict-prone and conflict-affected communities. The 822 barangays cleared of CTG influence constitute the first batch of the program's beneficiaries. They will each receive a social development package worth 20 million pesos. The program is now being implemented nationwide with successive groundbreaking ceremonies conducted in all regions. Updates are available at the BDP transparency page and the NTF-LCAC website. As of July 19, 99% of the program's budget has been released to provincial and city governments for their implementation. And building now on this program's success, additional barangays cleared of the CTG in 2020 and 2021 are programmed for inclusion in the BDP next year. As chairman of the National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea, let me now provide updates on our efforts at securing our resources and fishermen in the area. We continue to optimize the deployment of all our assets to protect our maritime domain and allow our fishermen unhampered access to our fishing grounds. The AFP, PCG, PNP, and BIFAR have provided ample support for our fishermen and marine scientists to carry out their activities within our borders. Working together closely, our agencies uphold that Filipinos may fully benefit from the array of resources found within and beneath the seabed of our maritime domain. In closing, may I say that the national security policy environment and national security strategy is now shaped by COVID-19. The challenges of the pandemic underscore the evolving nature of national security and its correlation with economic development. The Duterte administration has persevered in addressing these challenges through the application of the national security policy and the national security strategy. Our national policies and undertakings have created a solid foundation for the implementation of programs covering our national interests. As we in the Security, Justice, and Peace Cabinet cluster remain focused on our efforts, we do so with pride and a sense of commitment and accomplishment. It is our hope that we have been able to improve and continue to uplift the lives of our fellow Filipinos. We will persevere in ensuring the country's well-being, territorial integrity, and sovereignty, anchored on our core values of social justice and democratic foundations. We thank you, our countrymen, the people we serve, for allowing us this opportunity to convey our contributions and directions for the nation's security and lasting peace. Ito ang aming pamanang kaligtasan at kapayapaan na handog sa inyo. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas!
Thank you very much, Secretary Esperon, and to the rest of the heads of the agencies under the Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster. Now, to moderate today's open forum, please welcome on stage PCOO Assistant Secretary J.V. Arsena.
The strong dedication and resilience of our country's defenders is reflected in the reports given to us by the secretaries. The programs and projects established during their time is a true example of the pamanang kaligtasan at kapayapaan they are proudly living. Now we move to the part of the program where we hear from you. Every year in the Pre-SONA forums, we engage with the general public by answering their questions addressed to the different agencies under the SJPC. We continue today's program by calling upon the various heads of agencies that are present with us today and those who are joining us virtually. We invite here on stage Cabinet Secretary Carlo Alexe B. Nograles, Secretary Delphine N. Lorenzana of the Department of National Defense, Secretary Eduardo M. Anyo of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Secretary Carlito G. Galvez Jr., Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, National Security Advisor Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr. of the National Security Council, and Secretary Allen Capuyan of the National Commission on Indigenous People. And joining us virtually, Secretary Menardo Guevara of the Department of Justice. All right. At the start of the program, we allowed the general public to send their questions online and our stakeholders that are present here today to pose their questions to the cluster agencies. To begin, our first question is addressed to Secretary Delphine Lorenzana. Sir,
Hello.
the question is, what is the legacy of the Duterte administration to the Philippines' defense and security? What is the President's biggest accomplishment in this sector?
The biggest accomplishment or legacy that will be left by President Duterte in the Defense Department is the procurement of military assets. We had a lot of procurement or of assets procured during his time, and in addition to that, he has also ordered us to improve our operations against the CPP-NPA. And when he leaves office 11 months from now, we expect that the CPP-NPA will be downgraded into just maybe a law enforcement problem. So those are the two legacies, improvement of the capabilities of the AFP and improvement of our operations against or actions against the CPP-NPA and also the terrorist groups in Mindanao.
Thank you, Secretary Lorenzana. Next question for Secretary Hermogenes Esperon of NSC. What is the basis for choosing the barangays who received and will be receiving the Barangay Development Program?
It is actually a long process. Which started with the classification of barangays into whether they are threatened or under the influence of the communist terrorist groups. There have been records that are existing in the security sector, the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police on this. And so they were our targets, actually, in what we would call keyhole approach or operations. We cleared these barangays, and we continue to clear these barangays so that the organs of political power, the armed group, and issues in the area are addressed preliminarily. We do this through the use of what we call the community support program and improve with what we now call the retooled community support program that involves the local officials, meaning the barangay officials, the municipal officials, the national government officials, and the private sector. After clearing these barangays, we now determine their needs. And it is very good that the President has approved the program, which actually he had been looking forward to. Because when he created the National Task Force, LCAP, he said that the key to solving this is through good governance and by involving the barangay officials and the people in the barangays. And so the barangays were the ones who determined their needs, and this was elevated to us. What is now happening, therefore, is that in the implementation process, we now issue or release the funds to the provincial or city governments, and the program or the projects are undertaken through the collaboration of the provincial government and the municipal government, but most especially with the barangay people. And so it's an bottom to up and top to bottom process. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Esperon. Next question is addressed to Secretary Menardo Guevara of DOJ. The question is, any update on the DOJ's review of the government's anti-drug operations?
Yes, we are about to wind up with the review of around 52 cases turned over to us by the PNP internal of the PNP. And if time will permit, we will also take a look at the more than 6,000 cases which were also investigated by the PNP, IAS, but where the respondents were exonerated for insufficiency of evidence. Itong naunang 52 cases, doon may finding ng administrative liability ang PNP Internal Affairs Service. So yun ang uunahin namin dahil may nakita na sila doon. No? And time permitting also, we will continue what we have begun by looking at the records of the National Prosecution Service.
Thank you, Secretary Guevara. Next question is addressed to Secretary Anyo of DILG. The question is, how would you assess the administration's efforts in combating illegal drugs? Would you rate it as a success, or do you feel that much still needs to be done?
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy and proud to announce that we have so much gained so much ground in our relentless campaign against illegal drugs, because we have a very effective Philippine anti-drug strategy. And ano ba itong Philippine anti-drug strategy na to? No? This is the blueprint on how the national government and all sectors should work together in cutting the supply and demand and the demand. For the supply, we have aggressive law enforcement and prosecution. In fact, as I mentioned in the figures, we have arrested about 200,000 plus drug peddlers and drug syndicates. 12,000 are about high-value targets. And we have the DOJ, the NBI, the PIDEA, the PNP, and other law enforcement group that conduct these aggressive operations. On the demand side, we have the LGU at the forefront of this fight. They are the ones spearheading the activation of functional anti-drug abuse councils from the provincial down to the barangay. We exact responsibility and accountability to the local chief executives in the fight against drugs. They also conduct the barangay drug clearing. In fact, 21,891 barangays have been cleared already, and they provide financial and technical support for alternative development programs. So meaning to say, no, even livelihood programs for our drug users are provided para makaiwas na sila sa drugs. And of course, sa national agencies, together with LGUs and NGOs, we have what we call the Drug Abuse Treatment and Rehab Center. We have about 72 all over the country. And in the local level, we have the what you call community-based rehabilitation program. And we have also preventive education and capacity building, judicial and legislative measures, as well as regulatory compliance. In coordination with the international body, sinisigurado natin na lahat ng mga illegal substances ay nakalista sa pinagbabawal natin na gamot. So meaning to say, we have been very, very successful on this. Do we need to do more? Yes, we have to do more until we have arrested the last drug pusher, until we have dismantled the drug syndicate, and until we have rehabilitated the last drug addict. So we'll make sure that we'll continue this campaign. Although we're winning, but we'll make sure that this institutionalization shall continue even after this administration.
Thank you, Secretary Anyo. Ang susunod na tanong naman po para kay Secretary Galvez of OPAP. Sir, ano po sa tingin niyo ang pinakamalaking legasiya ni Pangulong Duterte sa usaping pangkapayapaan sa ilalim ng kanyang administrasyon?
Bilang taga Mindanao, naiintindihan niya yung usaping pangkapayapaan. Nakita po natin ang isang sa pinakamalaking legasiya po niya is yung ratifikasyon ng Bangsamoro Organic Law at ang harmonization ng BOL and also the 1996 Final Peace Agreement. Nakita po natin na sa inaugural speech ng ating mahal na Pangulo na talagang sinasabi niya sa atin na he honors all the commitments given by the government to all the rebel groups. At nakita natin na mula nung sa kanyang administrasyon, sinulong niya na po ang pagkapayapaan sa lahat ng mga grupo. Unang-una po dito, nakita natin na ngayon umuusad na po ng malakas ang normalisasyon at saka yung tinatawag na political track ng ating Bangsamoro Organic Law. Nakapag-labas na po tayo na tinatawag nating 12,145 na decommissioned combatants na are now being rehabilitated and now being transformed to peaceful communities. At nakita rin po natin na yung kapatiran, yung ABB, NPA-ABB group na ang tagal nang naghintay ng since 2000 ay nagkaroon po ng katuparan ng kanilang tinatawag na CID agreement. At nakapagkaroon po tayo ng rehabilitation and economic program doon sa 727 na ating mga kapatiran members. And also, tinignan po natin na because of the model that we had, yung tinatawag nating comprehensive normalization program, yun po ay ating in-implement sa other groups. Like for example, sa CPLA, ay nagkaroon po tayong tinatawag na exit agreements wherein we continue to engage them and harness the relationship between the government and the rebel group. So yun po ang nakita po natin na napakagandang legasiya ng ating mahal na Presidente na maipatupad ang 6-point agenda ng pamahalaan upang makasatuparan ang tahimik na pamayanan at nakita po natin ang Mindanao po ngayon is relatively peaceful. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Secretary Galvez. Next question is addressed to Cabsec Nograles. As a Cabinet Officer for Regional Development and Security for the region, I think Region 13, sir, no, Caraga, with the second highest number of priority barangay under the Barangay Development Program, how is your region of assignment ensuring the full implementation of its identified priority programs?
Well, siguro itong sagot ko na ito, siguro should apply to all of the regions, no? Unang-una, dapat maunawaan natin ng ating mga kababayan, yung CORDS system po ng ating gobyerno ay hindi lang po yung cabinet officer in charge na region ang nakatutok dyan. The CORDS system actually fuses at involves both the RDC at ang RPOC, no? Yung Regional Development Council pati ang Regional Peace and Order Council. Bakit mahalaga yan? Kasi kailangan ipaliwanag natin na yung both the Regional Development Council pati Regional Peace and Order Council also have private sector members dyan. Members ng private sector ay nandyan. So in terms of the identification of the area of the barangay na makikinabang sa barangay development program and up to the implementation ay nakatutok din po ang non-government. So may government na nakatutok, may non-government aspect din or members na nakatutok dyan. Una sa lahat. Pangalawa, sa implementation din po, nandyan din po ang mag-implement is usually the local government unit in charge, no? Kasi tulad dito sa Caraga, 100% no, 100% ng funding ay na-download na po sa mga LGUs for implementation. So nandyan po yung LGUs to implement those projects at ang nakasupervise po dyan ang DILG, siyempre, ang nakatutok dyan. So if there's any complaint or any problem in terms of the implementation, agad-agad meron naman pong supervisory powers ang DILG dyan. Kung may pang-abuso or may hindi maganda pagkagawa, isumbong lang po sa DILG at DILG na po bahala dyan. Then pangatlong aspeto din po, yung sa barangay itself, no? So the implementation of the project is nandoon sa barangay. So any member of the barangay, kung may nakita na hindi magandang pagka-implement or whatever, no, questionable, ay pwede naman po agad magsumbong ang mga barangay constituents kung may problema sa implementation. And the fourth and final is yung Commission on Audit. So meron din po that will be subjected to COA. COA will investigate, COA will monitor and audit the project itself to make sure, no, kung totoo ba at maganda pa ang pagkagawa ng proyekto at pag-implement ng project or program na ang program po na yan. So yun po ang 4 levels of kumbaga security and check and balance natin, private sector, DILG, barangay constituents, and ang Commission on Audit.
Thank you, Cabsec Nograles. Another question for Secretary Esperon of NSC. Ang tanong po, sir, the pandemic has increased dependence on technology. What are the steps that the government has taken to ensure cybersecurity?
Mabuti, napakagandang tanong yan dahil ang cybersecurity ay isang pangunahing pinagtutuunan natin ng pansin ngayon. Lalo na tayo na ay nandito sa tinatawag nating age or era of the 4th Industrial Revolution, na kung saan ang pangunahing mga gamit ay mga computers at ang mga laman nito ay data, napakaraming data. At alam naman natin na itong mga sistema natin ay maaring masira dahil sa physical sabotage or magkaroon ng delay of service or disruption of services. At pag ikaw ngayon ay nagkaroon ng aberya sa ating sistema, ay talaga namang napakalaki ng damages na nangyayari o disruption sa ating serbisyo. Kung kaya nga, una pa man ay nagkaroon na sa DICT, sa pamumuno ng DICT, ng tinatawag nating National Computer Emergency Response Team. National Computer Emergency Response Team. At ito naman ay dinuplika sa mga sektor upang magkaroon ng CERT, ang computer emergency response teams. Kalaunan ay nagbuo na ang gobyerno ng tinatawag nating National Cybersecurity Interagency Committee. At yan ay pinangungunahan ng ating butihing Executive Secretary as Chairman. Secretary Gregorio Honasan is co-chairman, and I also serve as co-chairman in that group. At sa pagpapatupad ng ating hangarin na maganda ang daloy at serbisyo ng ating mga systems, ay kailan lang ay nagbuo na tayo ng mga tinatawag nating technical working groups upang subaybayan or to monitor what is happening in several sectors. And now, we call this the technical working groups. One is the TWG for PhilSys, yung ating national ID, na pag nasa butahe yan ay malaking problema. Kaya ito ay pinamamunuan ngayon ng Office of the Executive Secretary, yung pag-antabay, pag-implement ng ating cybersecurity operations. Meron ding TW on telcos, and this is led by DICT himself, para sa Globe, Smart, Dito, and other telecommunications companies. Sa technical working group naman sa National Grid Corporation of the Philippines ay inaatasan na buo ang aming team at pinangungunahan ko yung team natin ngayon doon under the National Security Advisor. We have formed other technical working groups for aviation under the Department of Transportation, banking and finance under the Bangko Sentral and the Department of Finance. We have the BPO, itong mga call centers natin, pinangungunahan naman ng DTI yan, Department of Trade and Industry. Mayroon tayong technical working group on healthcare na pinangungunahan ng Department of Health, TWG for immigration, led by the Bureau of Immigration. We have TWG Maritime under the Department of Transportation. And we have one for mass transport under, again, Department of Transportation. We have a technical working group for space. Napaka-importante yan. There are so many developments in space that we have to exploit and take advantage of. And this is led now by the Philippine Space Agency. And the last is the technical working group on dams. Mga dams. At yan ay pinangungunahan ng Department of Energy. So, nakaporma na lahat yan. Tayo po ay talagang handa upang gampanan ang ating pagpapatupad ng ating cybersecurity systems and operations. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Secretary Esperon. Next question is addressed again to Secretary Guevara of the DOJ. The question is, concerns have been raised regarding the entry into the country of the dreaded Delta variant of the coronavirus. What instructions, if any, were given to the Bureau of Immigration, an agency under the DOJ, to ensure that no traveler infected with the same would be able to enter the country?
First of all, naghigpit ang Bureau of Immigration sa pag-enforce ng mga guidelines na nanggagaling sa IATF at sa Office ng Executive Secretary in connection with mga foreign nationals coming into the country, lalo na yung mga nanggagaling sa mga bansa na tinuturing na hindi safe. No? As a matter of fact, nag-identify tayo ng mga certain countries na yung mga nanggagaling doon sa mga lugar na yon ay hindi talaga po pwedeng papasukin muna pansamantala sa ating bansa. At yan ay mahigpit na pinapatupad ng Bureau of Immigration. Ang isa pang sinabi ko sa kanila namang ginawa really on their own initiative ay yung pag-suspend muna in the meantime ng paggamit ng tinatawag nating e-gates. No? Ito yung electronic gates na for certain passengers ay hindi na kailangang dumaan sa regular na mga counters ng immigration officers. Halimbawa, yung mga OFWs, no? At yan ay ginawa natin para mas lalong maging careful ang ating mga immigration officers sa pag-investigate, pag-check ng travel history ng ating mga pumapasok na passengers. So, ganun lamang naman talaga ang ginagawa ng Bureau of Immigration, talaga lang mas mahigpit na pagpapatupad ng mga guidelines at ng mga kautusan ng ating mga superior officials at mga health officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Guevara. Last question from the general public for Secretary Anyo. Sec, how confident are you about the country's COVID-19 response, particularly with the possible spread of the Delta variant in the country?
Thank you. Truly, I'm very confident that we can control and manage the spread of the Delta variant because we have already implement an existing system on how to contain the spread of the virus. First of all, with the ITF and the National Task Force on COVID and the LGUs, nakaset up na yung mekanismo na yan. No? Una-una, we will have a very strict implementation of the laws, ordinances, the IATF omnibus guidelines, the community quarantine protocols, and the minimum health standard. As you see, we have arrested a lot of violators, and we will continue to do so. Katulad na sinabi ni Secretary Guevara, we will also impose strict border controls, measures on international airports and seaports, and establish our regular and mobile checkpoints for interzonal movement. The LGUs, being the center of all this effort, shall lead the aggressive PDITR plus vaccination strategy. And likewise, they will impose immediate granular lockdown on identified areas where Delta variant are located. And with our Oplan Kalinga, lahat ng COVID positive ay dapat ilalagay natin sa mga TTMF at isolation facilities. We can no longer allow home quarantine with this Delta variant. And we are thinking even of making a separate quarantine or isolation facility for Delta variant patients. And likewise, dapat madagdagan din yung ating mga, so inutusan na natin yung mga ating LGU na magdagdag ng quarantine and isolation facilities in their respective jurisdiction in anticipation of the spread of the variant. And we will continue to consult and engage them, the leagues, so that we can review and assess our current efforts against COVID-19 to improve further our performance as well as share best practices and lessons learned in fighting COVID. And of course, pinaka-importante dito, the ramping up or rolling out, fast-track rolling out of our vaccination. Because after all, this vaccination is the key in defeating this COVID-19 virus. With, of course, special services to our A2 and A3. Kapag ma-secure na natin yung vaccination ng A2 and A3 natin, mababawasan yung ating mortality. So we are prepared for this Delta variant as early as bago pa dumating itong variant sa ating bansa. And with the cooperation of everyone, we can do this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Anyo. And with that last question, we would like to extend our gratitude to all who made this event possible. Maraming salamat to all our agency secretaries and our executives present online for answering the public's queries, and of course to our secretaries on stage. We would like also to ask our secretaries here for a group photo, if our stage managers could assist. Thank you to our dear executives and the cabinet. Our team will now assist you back to your respective seats. We still have a lot of questions lined up for our secretaries, especially from our friends from the media. Immediately after our forum ends, we will have a virtual presser which will be streamed online. To all our viewers on air, online, and those who are here with us today, the Pre-SONA series is meant to inform everyone of the programs and policies of our government which are intended to benefit and improve the lives of the Filipino people. In line with this, please feel free to visit the link now on screen to obtain copies of the reports shared throughout our Pre-SONA forums. You may also request the said materials through the email address now shown on your screens. All accomplishments and all programs will not be possible without the support, leadership, and vision of our Commander-in-Chief, our Tatay. I invite you all to listen to the message of our dear President, Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
I appreciate the efforts of the PCOO in organizing these forums that aim to enlighten our people of the various accomplishments and milestones that we have achieved so far during my administration. These events provide insights on the government's work and policies and programs that aim to leave a lasting legacy to our nation. Let me assure everyone that this administration will continue to work hard so that we can recover, rebuild, and rise stronger than before. With our unity and resilience, I am confident that we can overcome all these obstacles. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po kayo.
Bigyan po natin ng masigabong palakpakan si Pangulong Duterte. Thank you very much, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte. Our dedication and hard work are inspired by your passion to faithfully and unwaveringly serve the Filipino people. To the Security, Justice, and Peace Cluster, our warmest thank you for sharing your accomplishments today. We are looking forward to the next and final Pre-SONA forum with the Climate Change, Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction Management Cluster tomorrow, July 22, 2021 in Pasay City. The upcoming Pre-SONA forum with the CCAM DRRMC cluster will ultimately lead to the final State of the Nation address by President Rodrigo Roa Duterte on Monday, July 26, 2021. The President's final SONA will be aired across all government platforms, including the newly renovated PTV stations located in Baguio, Naga, Tacloban, Calbayog, Dumaguete, Cebu, Guimaras, Palawan, Davao City, Cotabato, Zamboanga, Sibugay, Mega Manila, Davao del Norte, and Agusan, as well as the newly operational and improved PTV digital stations in Baguio, Naga, Cebu, Guimaras, Davao City, and Mega Manila. To our viewers, thank you very much for joining us in today's Pamana ng Pagbabago, the 2021 Pre-SONA Forums. We hope to see you in the next one.
Thank you for taking part in our third Pre-SONA Forum featuring the Security, Justice, and Peace.